I arrived at my parents' house on a Thursday evening in late September, expecting nothing more than a casual pre-wedding dinner. My younger sister Amanda was getting married in 2 weeks to some investment banker named Brad, and I figured this was just another family gathering to finalize details. But when I walked through that front door, I knew immediately something was wrong. My mother's face was stone cold. My father wouldn't make eye contact. Amanda sat on the couch with her arms crossed, wearing this smirk that made my stomach turn. They gestured for me to sit. My mother spoke first, her voice steady and cruel. "The greatest gift you could give your sister for her wedding is if you disappear from our family. Forever." The room went silent. My heart stopped. They were serious. Completely serious. I sat there for maybe 10 seconds, trying to process what I'd just heard. Then I found my voice, shaky but present. "Why? What are you talking about?" Amanda leaned forward, her eyes sharp with something that looked like satisfaction. "You've always been jealous of me, Jason. Always trying to ruin my happiness. Ever since Brad and I got engaged, you've been nothing but toxic and negative." I blinked at her, confused. "What? I've barely even talked to you about the wedding." "That's because every time you do, you criticize him. You make snide comments about our budget. You've been sabotaging this whole thing with your attitude." None of that was true. I'd met Brad twice, said he seemed nice, and kept my distance because I was busy with work. I'd made exactly 0 comments about their wedding budget. But as I tried to defend myself, my father finally spoke up, his voice flat and final. "We've made our decision, Jason. We want you gone before the wedding. Actually, we want you gone, period." My mother added, almost casually, "We've talked to a lawyer. You're not in the will anymore. We're done with you." I looked at each of them, searching for some sign that this was a cruel joke, some test I was supposed to pass. But their faces were set. They'd already decided. Something inside me broke right then, but it wasn't what they probably expected. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I didn't throw myself at their feet and plead for their love. Instead, I stood up slowly, feeling this strange calm wash over me. "Fine," I said. "You want me gone? I'm gone." I walked upstairs to my old bedroom, the one they'd kept mostly intact since I moved out 6 years ago. I packed my old photo albums, the few personal items I'd left behind over the years. Then I remembered something. I went to the hallway closet and found what I was looking for: a set of keys to my parents' vacation condo in Colorado. They'd given them to me 4 years ago when they added me as an emergency contact on the property paperwork. They'd probably forgotten all about it. I took the keys and went back downstairs. My parents and Amanda had moved to the kitchen. I could hear them in there, actually laughing about something, the sound of wine glasses clicking together. They went silent when I appeared in the doorway with my 2 bags. I looked at my mother one last time. "I'm taking the Colorado condo keys. My name's on the paperwork. Don't contact me." Then I walked to the front door, opened it, stepped through, and closed it firmly behind me, like a final punctuation mark ending a sentence I never wanted to read again. I drove back to my apartment in Denver, my hands shaking on the wheel. I didn't cry. I just felt this growing rage mixed with something else, something colder. By the time I pulled into my parking spot, I'd made a decision. If they wanted me gone, I'd be gone. But on my terms. The next morning, Friday, I woke up at 6, with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made coffee, sat down with my laptop, and started making calls. First, I contacted a realtor I'd worked with when I bought my condo 3 years ago. I own my place outright, paid for it in cash after saving aggressively through my 20s while working as a software engineer. I told him I wanted to sell. Fast. He said he could have it listed by Monday, and with the Denver market, we'd probably have offers within days. Then I called my bank. This was the part I'd been thinking about all night. Years ago, when I was 22 and just starting my career, my parents opened a joint savings account with me. They called it the Family Emergency Fund. Over the years, I'd contributed regularly, thinking it was for genuine emergencies like medical bills or home repairs. The account had about $70,000 in it now, and I'd personally deposited at least $35,000 of that. I told the bank representative I wanted to freeze the account pending a review of ownership. Since my name was on it, I had that right. The rep put a hold on it immediately. By noon, my phone was exploding. 17 missed calls from my mother, 23 texts from my father. The messages from Amanda were the worst, vicious, and entitled. "You're even more selfish than we thought," one read. "Trying to ruin my wedding because you're a loser who can't find anyone to love him." I didn't respond to any of them. I silenced my phone and kept working through my checklist. That's when Aunt Carol called. She's my mother's younger sister, and we've always been close. She basically helped raise me when my parents were too busy with their careers. Her voice was shaking when I answered. "Jason, what happened?" "Your mother called me, said you've gone crazy, that you stole from them." I told her everything, the whole story, start to finish. When I finished, there was this long silence on the line. Then Aunt Carol said something that changed everything. "Oh God, Jason, there's something you need to know, but not over the phone. Can you meet me?" We agreed on a diner across town, 1 hour. I spent that hour pacing my apartment, trying to imagine what she could possibly need to tell me in person. The diner was one of those old-fashioned places with red vinyl booths and a checkerboard floor. Aunt Carol was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. I slid into the seat across from her, and before I could even say hello, she started talking. "Jason, your parents are bankrupt. Completely bankrupt." I felt like I'd been punched. "What?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "They lost everything about 8 months ago. Some investment scheme they got involved with. I don't know all the details, but it was bad. The house? It's mortgaged to the hilt. They're 3 months behind on payments. Foreclosure proceedings start next month. They've been living on credit cards, and those are maxed out too." I tried to process this. My parents had always been comfortable, upper middle class. My father worked in pharmaceutical sales. My mother was a hospital administrator. How did they lose everything? Carol shook her head. "Like I said, I don't know the specifics. Some investment opportunity that turned out to be fraudulent. They were too embarrassed to tell anyone. But here's the thing, Jason. Amanda's wedding? They promised to pay for it. $50,000. Money they absolutely do not have." My stomach dropped. "So they're in debt, about to lose their house, and they've promised 50 grand they don't have for Amanda's wedding." Carol's voice got quieter. "That's not even the worst part." I waited, barely breathing. She looked around the diner like someone might be listening, then leaned in close. "They weren't kicking you out because they hate you, Jason. They need you gone because they're planning to take out a life insurance policy in your name, forge your signature, then stage an accident." The world tilted. "What?" Carol was crying now, trying to keep her voice down. "I only found out yesterday. I was at their house, and your mother was on the phone in her bedroom. I heard her talking about it. About how if you were just gone, they'd get the payout, $500,000. I confronted her after she hung up, and she didn't deny it, Jason. She just looked at me and said, 'Desperate times call for desperate measures.' I couldn't breathe. My own parents, my own mother and father were planning to murder me for insurance money." Carol grabbed my hand across the table. "You have to go to the police. You have to tell them." I shook my head slowly, my mind racing. "I have no proof. It's just hearsay. What you overheard wouldn't hold up. They'd just deny everything, and then I'd really be a target." "So what are you going to do?" I thought for a long moment. "Disappear, but on my own terms. I'm going to Colorado, to the condo. But first, I'm documenting everything. I'm going to protect myself." We spent the next 2 hours at that diner while I outlined my plan. I'd withdraw cash from my personal accounts, change all my passwords, set up new email addresses they didn't know about. I'd contact a lawyer, draw up a document detailing everything I knew and everything Carol had told me, and leave it in a sealed envelope with her. If anything happened to me, she'd take it straight to the authorities. Carol agreed to hold the envelope. She also gave me the name of a private investigator she knew, someone discreet who might be able to dig up more information about this insurance scheme. I took the name, thanked her, and we left the diner separately. I spent that evening back at my apartment, working methodically through my plan. I pulled out $5,000 in cash from an ATM, made copies of all my important documents, changed every password I had. I wrote out a detailed timeline of events and sealed it in an envelope along with copies of the threatening texts from Amanda. Around 9 that night, there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole and felt my blood run cold. It was Brad, Amanda's fiancé. He was alone, looking nervous, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. Every instinct told me not to open that door. But something, curiosity maybe, or the need to understand what was happening, made me unlock it. Brad pushed inside the moment I cracked the door open, then shut it quickly behind him. "We need to talk," he said, his voice urgent. "Your sister and your parents, they're planning something, and I think I'm being used too." I stared at him, trying to read whether this was another trap. "Why are you here?" He ran his hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "Because I'm not who everyone thinks I am, and I think I'm in over my head." Brad moved to my living room window, checked the street below, then turned to face me. His whole demeanor was different from the confident investment banker I'd met at family dinners. He looked scared. "I'm not actually a wealthy investment banker," he said quietly. "That's what my uncle told me to pretend to be." I felt my jaw tighten. "Your uncle? His name is Frank. Frank Morrison. He's involved in insurance fraud schemes. Has been for 20 years. And I got into some trouble. Gambling debts mostly. About $50,000 I couldn't pay. Frank offered to help me, but there was a condition." "What condition?" I asked, though I was starting to piece it together. "He needed someone to marry into your family. Someone to help orchestrate an accident." "Your accident?" He said if I did this, help set it up, he'd clear my debts and give me $25,000 on top of it. Brad looked at me with what seemed like genuine shame. I thought he was joking at first. But then he introduced me to Amanda at this charity event he'd arranged, and everything fell into place too perfectly. "Your parents were already in Frank's pocket by then. They owed him money from that investment scheme that went bad. It was Frank's scheme, Jason. He set them up to fail, then offered them a way out." My head was spinning. So this whole thing, Amanda's engagement, the wedding, all of it was manufactured? Brad nodded. "Amanda doesn't know everything. She thinks I'm really an investment banker. She thinks the plan to get rid of you is just about the wedding, about her wanting you gone because she's jealous. But Frank has been feeding your parents a different story, about the insurance payout, about how it solves all their problems. And I've been the middleman, passing information, making sure everyone plays their part." "Why are you telling me this?" I demanded. "Why now?" He pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly, and showed me a series of text messages. They were from a number saved as Frank, and they made my blood run cold. "Make it look like suicide" was one message. "Drowning preferred. Body found in Colorado" was another. The most recent one, from just that afternoon, said timeline moved up. "Handle it next week before wedding. Too many complications." Brad looked up from the phone. "I thought this was just going to be talk, scare tactics maybe. I didn't think Frank was serious about actually killing you. But these messages, they're real plans, detailed instructions. And Frank knows you have keys to the Colorado condo. He's been planning to use that location." I wanted to trust Brad's sudden conscience, but I couldn't shake my suspicion. "How do I know this isn't just another setup? How do I know you're not here to see what I know, to report back to Frank?" Brad set his phone on my coffee table. "Take pictures of those messages. Send them to someone you trust. I'm giving you proof, and I'm telling you that Frank has people watching you right now. That's why I had to come now, while they're focused on watching the street, not your apartment building. He's planning to move next week. You don't have much time." I took pictures of the messages with my own phone, sent them immediately to Aunt Carol with a brief explanation. Then I looked at Brad hard. "What's your angle here? Why risk crossing Frank?" "Because I met your sister, and I actually fell for her," he said quietly. "And she doesn't deserve to be part of this. Neither do you. I thought I could just play along, take the money, and disappear. But Amanda wants a real marriage, a real life. And I realized Frank's not going to let any of us walk away clean. Once you're dead, who's to say he doesn't tie up other loose ends? Like me?" Brad had a point. In Frank's world, Witnesses were liabilities. After Brad left, giving me his real phone number and making me promise to call if anything happened, I sat in my apartment and tried to think clearly. I had evidence now, real evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. But would it be enough? These were text messages from an unknown number. I'd need more. I decided to accelerate my timeline. I'd leave for Colorado tonight, right now. I started packing, throwing clothes and supplies into my car in the parking garage. It was just past midnight, the garage mostly empty and quiet. I made 3 trips from my apartment to my car, loading everything I'd need for an extended stay. I was on my 4th trip, carrying my laptop bag and a box of files, when a white van pulled into the garage. It came in fast, too fast for normal traffic, and positioned itself to block my car. My heart started pounding as 2 men got out. They were both large, wearing dark clothes, and one of them had something in his hand, a metal pipe. The other had what looked like a taser. I dropped everything and ran. Behind me, I heard their footsteps, fast and heavy. I made it to the stairwell door and yanked it open, taking the stairs 2 at a time. 6 floors up to my apartment. My lungs were burning by the 3rd floor. I could hear them behind me, gaining ground. At the 6th floor, I burst through the door into the hallway and started screaming. "Help! Someone help me! Call the police!" Doors opened. My neighbor directly across from me, a retired veteran named Mr. Patterson, stepped out in his bathrobe. Behind him, I could see him reaching for something. Other doors opened too. Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down, the college students at the end of the hall. The 2 men who'd been chasing me appeared in the stairwell doorway, saw the witnesses, and immediately retreated back down the stairs. Mr. Patterson called 911. The police arrived within 8 minutes. I gave them a statement, described the men in the van, but I didn't mention Frank or my family or the insurance plot. I just said I'd been attacked by unknown assailants in the parking garage. The officer taking my report seemed sympathetic but not particularly optimistic. Without cameras in that garage, and without a clear description of the attackers' faces, there wasn't much they could do except file the report and increase patrols in the area. They offered to escort me back down to check on my car. When we got there, I found all 4 tires slashed. The bags I dropped when I ran? Gone. Stolen. And those bags had contained my passport, my backup hard drive with all my evidence documentation, and the $5,000 in cash I'd withdrawn. The police officer looked at the scene and said, "Looks like someone really wants to send you a message." I stood there in that parking garage, surrounded by police, but feeling completely vulnerable, and realized something terrifying. I wasn't just running from my family anymore. I was being actively hunted by professionals, and they'd just taken my escape route. I spent what was left of that night in my apartment with my door locked and a chair wedged under the handle. Mr. Patterson, bless him, checked on me twice and offered to stay awake, keeping watch. I declined but appreciated the gesture. By sunrise, I'd made new plans. I couldn't use my car with slashed tires, and replacing them would take time I didn't have. So I went to a rental agency 4 blocks from my apartment, paid cash for a mid-size sedan using my driver's license, and loaded my remaining possessions. The drive to Colorado was 15 hours of paranoid mirror, checking and jumping at every car that stayed behind me too long. I stopped only for gas and bathroom breaks, eating protein bars I'd grabbed from my apartment. I arrived at the mountain condo just as the sun was setting, the sky turning deep purple over the peaks. The condo was exactly as I remembered it. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a valley. Remote, peaceful, the kind of place that felt safe. I unpacked quickly, checked that all the locks worked, and then allowed myself to collapse on the couch. For the first time in 3 days, I felt like I could breathe. I used the burner phone I'd bought at a gas station to call Aunt Carol. She answered on the first ring, relief flooding her voice. Thank God. I was so worried. I told her I was safe, gave her the general area but not the specific address. She had news that made my stomach sink. Your parents reported you missing this morning. They filed a report saying you'd had a mental breakdown, that you made threats, that you were potentially suicidal. They're setting up the narrative, I said quietly. Exactly, Carol confirmed. They're telling everyone who'll listen that you've been unstable, that they're worried you might hurt yourself. If something happens to you now, it looks like suicide, not murder. We talked for a few more minutes before I hung up, promising to check in daily. I spent the next 2 days in a strange kind of limbo. The condo had enough supplies to last me a week. I made coffee, ate canned soup, and tried to figure out my next move. The mountain air was clean and cold, and in any other circumstance, this would have been a peaceful retreat. On the third morning, I heard a car pull up outside. My heart jumped into my throat until I recognized who got out. Brad. He was alone, wearing jeans and a jacket, looking around cautiously before approaching the front door. I debated not answering, but he'd already seen movement in the window. I opened the door a crack. "What are you doing here?" "I couldn't go through with it," he said immediately. "I broke up with Amanda. Told her I couldn't marry her. I didn't tell her why, just said I wasn't ready. And then I drove here because you need to know that Frank is escalating." I let him inside, still wary. Brad looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept since I last saw him. "I have recordings," he said, pulling out his phone again. "Conversations with Frank. Detailed discussions about the plan. I've been documenting everything for the past week, trying to build evidence." He played me several audio files. Frank's voice was cold and calculating, discussing timelines, methods, contingencies. In one recording, he specifically mentioned the Colorado condo, how remote it was, how easy it would be to stage an accident there. "This is good," I said. "This is real evidence. We need to take this to the FBI." Brad nodded. "That's why I'm here. I have a contact, someone I trust. A private investigator in Denver who specializes in fraud cases. His name is Marcus Webb. If we give him this evidence, he can help us build a case. We can bring Frank down, and your parents with him." I wanted to believe him. I needed allies, and Brad was offering to be one. "Okay," I said. "When do we meet this investigator?" "Tomorrow," Brad replied. "Marcus can meet us in Denver. There's an office he uses in the warehouse district. Neutral territory. We can give him everything, and he'll know how to proceed." We spent the rest of that day and night at the condo. Brad slept on the couch while I took one of the bedrooms, though I barely slept at all. Every sound outside made me jump. Every car passing on the distant road made me wonder if Frank had found us. The next morning, we left early for Denver. The drive took about 3 hours. Brad navigated while I drove, directing me to an industrial area on the outskirts of the city. Warehouses and storage facilities lined the streets. "This is it," Brad said, pointing to a nondescript building with a small office entrance. Marcus said he'd meet us inside. We parked and walked to the entrance. The door was unlocked. Inside was a small reception area leading to a hallway. Brad led the way confidently, like he'd been here before. The hallway opened into a larger space. What looked like it had once been a warehouse floor, but was now partitioned into makeshift office areas. And that's when I saw Frank. He was standing in the center of the space with the same 2 men who'd attacked me in the parking garage. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I turned to run, but Brad grabbed my arm. "I'm sorry, Jason," he said, and his voice was different now. Flat, resigned. "Uncle Frank made me an offer I couldn't refuse. The full amount. Plus, a guarantee he'd clear all my debts and set me up with a new identity after this was done." I tried to pull away, but the 2 men were already on me. They grabbed my arms, twisted them behind my back, zip-tied my wrists together. Frank walked over slowly, looking at me like I was a problem he was about to solve. "You've been more trouble than you're worth, Jason. Your parents were supposed to keep you compliant. Amanda was supposed to keep you distracted. And Brad here was supposed to deliver you quietly. But you had to go and make things complicated." He nodded to his men, who dragged me toward a back room. Frank followed, explaining almost casually what would happen next. "We're going to stage an overdose. Leave your body in your rental car out on some mountain road. You're already on record as mentally unstable, potentially suicidal. This will be clean. Your family gets their insurance payout. I get my money back. And everyone moves on with their lives. Everyone except you, of course." They threw me into the back room, a small windowless space with concrete walls. One of the men checked the zip ties, making sure they were tight. Then they left. closing the door behind them. I could hear them in the next room, discussing logistics, how much sedative to use, where to dump the car, how to make sure there were no witnesses. But they'd made a mistake. The zip ties were tight, but not impossibly so. I'm flexible from years of yoga and rock climbing, hobbies I'd picked up in my 20s. I worked my wrists, ignoring the pain as the plastic cut into my skin, creating friction. It took maybe 10 minutes of constant movement, but I managed to slip one hand free. My wrists were bleeding, but I was loose. The room had a window. Small, high up on the wall, but big enough for me to fit through if I could reach it. I looked around frantically and found a metal shelf in the corner. I dragged it under the window as quietly as possible, climbed up, and pushed the window open. It led to an alley behind the warehouse. I squeezed through, dropped about 8 feet to the ground, and ran. Behind me, I heard shouting. They discovered I was gone. I sprinted through the alley, came out onto a busy street, and just kept running. I had no phone, no wallet, no ID. Nothing but the clothes on my back and blood dripping from my wrists. I ran for 3 blocks before ducking into a crowded restaurant. The hostess took one look at me and started to call security, but I begged her, "Please, I just need to use a phone. I'm in danger. Please." Something in my face must have convinced her because she handed me the restaurant's phone. I dialed the only number I had memorized, Aunt Carol's. She answered, and I could barely get the words out. "It's Jason. I need help. I'm at a restaurant on Federal Boulevard. I don't know the cross street. Please come get me." She didn't ask questions. She said she'd be there in 20 minutes and told me to stay inside, stay around people. I waited in that restaurant, sitting in a booth with a glass of water the hostess brought me, watching the door like a trapped animal. Every person who walked in made my heart race. But then I saw Aunt Carol's car pull up outside, and I practically ran to meet her. She took one look at my wrists, at the blood and the zip tie marks, and started crying. "Oh, Jason, oh God, what did they do to you?" I told her everything on the drive to her house. About Brad's betrayal, about Frank and the warehouse, about barely escaping. Carol was shaking by the time I finished. "We have to go to the police. Right now." But before we could reach her house, we saw flashing lights behind us. 2 police cars, signaling us to pull over. Carol pulled to the shoulder, confused and scared. An officer approached her window. "Ma'am, is Jason Miller in the vehicle?" Carol nodded, unable to speak. The officer looked past her to me. "Jason Miller, you need to step out of the vehicle. You're under arrest." "What?" I said, my voice cracking. "What for?" "Embezzlement. Your parents filed formal charges this afternoon. You allegedly stole $70,000 from a joint family account and forged documents to freeze their assets. You're also wanted for questioning regarding threats made against your family." I was pulled from the car, handcuffed for the second time that day, and placed in the back of a patrol car. Through the window, I could see Aunt Carol crying, helpless. My parents had just turned the entire legal system against me. County jail is exactly as terrible as you'd imagine. I spent 2 days in a holding cell before my arraignment, sleeping on a thin mattress that smelled like bleach and despair. My wrists were bandaged by the jail nurse, who asked no questions about how I'd gotten injured. At the arraignment, I was assigned a public defender, a tired-looking woman named Miss Ramirez who had 17 other cases she was juggling. She met with me for exactly 20 minutes before the hearing. "The evidence against you is substantial," she said flatly. "Forged documents with your signature, email trails showing you planned to steal the money, witness statements from your parents and sister claiming you've been mentally unstable and making threats." I tried to explain about Frank, about the murder plot, about everything that had really happened. Miss Ramirez listened with the expression of someone who'd heard 1,000 desperate stories and believed none of them. "Mr. Miller," she said when I finished, "you're looking at 5 to 10 years if this goes to trial. The prosecution has a solid case. I'd strongly recommend we negotiate a plea deal, maybe get it down to 3 years with good behavior." I felt something die inside me. 3 years. For a crime I didn't commit, while the people who actually tried to kill me walked free. Bail was set at $100,000, which I couldn't make because all my accounts were frozen pending the investigation. So I stayed in county jail, becoming just another face in an orange jumpsuit. Days blurred together. I had one visitor during that first week, Brad's Uncle Frank. Somehow he'd gotten himself approved for visitation, probably through bribery or connections. He sat across from me in the visitation room, that same cold smile on his face. "You should have just disappeared quietly," he said conversationally. "Would have been painless. Quick. But you had to fight, had to complicate things. Now look at you." He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. "You know what's beautiful about this? Even if you tell people about me, about the insurance fraud, who's going to believe you? You're a criminal now, a thief who stole from his own parents. Your credibility is shot." Frank explained, enjoying himself, how the insurance policy was just the beginning. My parents owed his organization $200,000 from the investment scheme. The insurance payout would have covered that debt plus provided profit for everyone involved. "But since you complicated things," Frank continued, "we had to get creative. You'll rot in here. And when you get out, if you get out, we'll be waiting. Your parents still owe that money. One way or another, we're collecting." Then he told me something that made my blood freeze. Amanda wasn't some innocent victim in all this. She knew everything. The wedding to Brad, that was her idea. She'd approached Frank months ago with the whole plan. My baby sister, who I'd protected and cared for growing up, hated me enough to orchestrate my death. "She's always resented you," Frank said. "The golden child. The successful one. This was her chance to get rid of you and get a payout. She's more ruthless than your parents ever were." He left after that, leaving me sitting in that visitation room feeling like I'd been gutted. That evening, Aunt Carol visited. She looked exhausted, older than her 56 years. But there was determination in her eyes, too. "I hired a private investigator," she said immediately. "Used my retirement savings. His name is Marcus Webb. He's good, Jason. Really good. He specializes in exposing insurance fraud." She told me Marcus had already started digging into Frank's organization, into the fake investment scheme, into the forged insurance documents. But it takes time, and evidence has to be gathered carefully. I wanted to feel hope, but sitting in that jail cell, hope felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. My cellmate, a guy named Derek who was in for possession with intent to distribute, noticed my despair that night. "You look like a man who just got told he's dying," he said. "I'm in jail for a crime I didn't commit," I replied, "while the people who tried to kill me are free." Derek was quiet for a moment, then said, "I know a guy. Former cop, turned private investigator, Marcus Webb. He helps people like you. People who got screwed by the system." I looked up sharply. "Marcus Webb?" Derek nodded. "He helped my cousin 2 years ago. Insurance fraud case. Corrupt cops were in on it. Marcus exposed the whole thing. If your story's true, if you really are innocent, he'd eat this case alive. He hates dirty cops and corrupt schemes." It felt like fate. Aunt Carol had already hired him, and now Derek was confirming he was the right person for the job. "Give me his contact information," I said. "Through Aunt Carol, I'll make sure he has everything he needs." The next week crawled by. Marcus visited me twice, listening carefully to every detail, taking notes, asking sharp questions that told me he believed me, or at least believed enough to investigate thoroughly. He wanted 50% of any settlement or damages I recovered, which seemed steep but fair given the circumstances. I agreed immediately. By the end of that week, Marcus had made significant progress. He'd traced the insurance policy back to a document forger known to work for Frank's organization. He'd found bank transfers from my parents to shell companies connected to Frank. He'd even gotten Brad on a recorded phone call, where Brad admitted to his role in the scheme because he was scared Frank would kill him next. Marcus took everything to the FBI, deliberately bypassing local police because he suspected some officers might be on Frank's payroll. The FBI opened an investigation into Frank's organization, which meant my embezzlement charges were put on hold pending their review. 12 days after my arrest, I was released on my own recognizance. The judge acknowledged that there were significant questions about the charges against me, and that federal investigators had requested I remain available for questioning as a witness rather than a defendant. I walked out of that jail into bright September sunshine. Aunt Carol was waiting, and she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. But I wasn't the same person who'd gone in. 12 days in county jail had changed something fundamental in me. I'd lost my job. My employer had terminated me the day after my arrest. My apartment building had started eviction proceedings. My reputation was destroyed. Local news had covered my arrest with headlines like "Software Engineer Accused of Elder Financial Abuse." Aunt Carol drove me to her house. In the car, she handed me my phone. It had been in her keeping while I was locked up. There were 47 missed calls from various numbers, and one voicemail from Amanda. I almost deleted it without listening, but something made me press play. "Jason, it's me." Amanda's voice sounded different, scared. "We need to talk. Frank is threatening me now. Brad's missing. I haven't heard from him in 3 days. I think they're going to kill us both, to tie up loose ends. Please, I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve your help, but please, help me." I stared at the phone. My sister, who had orchestrated my near death, who had helped frame me for crimes I didn't commit, was now begging me for help. Aunt Carol glanced at me while driving. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. Marcus and Aunt Carol both said the same thing when I played them Amanda's voicemail. "It's a trap. Don't go." But I'd listened to that message 15 times, and there was something in Amanda's voice I'd never heard before. Genuine terror. Not the calculated coldness from our last conversation, but raw fear. I couldn't let her die, even after everything. Maybe that made me stupid. Maybe it made me weak. Or maybe it just made me human. I called the number she'd left the message from. She answered on the first ring. "Jason? Oh, thank God. Where are you?" I kept my voice flat. "That depends. Why should I trust you?" She started crying, and it sounded real. "I deserve that. I deserve everything you think of me. But Frank took Brad 3 days ago. He called me yesterday and said if I don't bring you to him, he'll kill Brad. He said he needs to clean up all the loose ends before the FBI investigation gets too close." "Where does he want to meet?" I asked. Amanda gave me an address. An abandoned ski lodge about 40 miles outside Denver. "Midnight tonight." He said come alone or Brad dies. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Marcus was already shaking his head. "You're not seriously considering this." I looked at him. "If I don't go, Brad dies. Possibly Amanda too. And I'm the one Frank really wants. This could be our chance to get him on tape, committing new crimes. Concrete evidence." Marcus studied me for a long moment. Then he made a decision. "If you're going, I'm coming with you. And we're wired. Full audio and video. FBI on standby. This goes wrong, they move in fast." We spent the rest of the day preparing. Marcus got recording equipment. Small cameras that clipped to my jacket. Audio devices that looked like buttons. We coordinated with FBI agents who would position themselves a mile away, ready to respond on Marcus's signal. At 11:30 that night, Marcus and I drove to the abandoned ski lodge. The building loomed against the dark sky, all broken windows and rotting wood. Marcus parked our vehicle a quarter-mile away, behind a cluster of trees. We approached on foot, Marcus hanging back while I went to the main entrance. The door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled like mildew and decay. I called out, "Amanda, are you here?" A light came on in what looked like the main lodge room. Amanda was there, sitting on an old couch, illuminated by a battery-powered lantern. She looked terrible, bruised, her hair matted, her eyes red from crying. "Jason," she whispered, "thank God you came." I approached slowly, scanning for threats. "Where's Brad?" She shook her head. "I don't know. Frank said he'd bring him, but I haven't seen him." "We need to talk," I said, positioning myself so the camera on my jacket had a clear view of her face. "About everything. Why you did this." Amanda broke down, started talking fast, words tumbling over each other. "I was jealous. So jealous it ate me alive. You were always the perfect one. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect life. Mom and Dad praised everything you did while I was just there. Just Amanda. Not good enough. Not special. And when I met Frank through a friend, and he told me about his business, I saw an opportunity." She admitted everything on camera. How she'd approached Frank with the idea of getting rid of me. How she'd suggested using Brad to infiltrate the family. How she'd convinced our parents they could solve their financial problems by taking out the insurance policy. I thought it would just be fraud, she said, still crying. I thought you'd just leave, be scared away, and we'd forge some paperwork and collect the money. I didn't understand Frank would actually try to kill you. When did you realize? I asked, keeping my voice steady for the recording. When Brad disappeared. Frank called me and said Brad had gotten cold feet, tried to back out. He said loose ends get cut. And I realized I'm a loose end too. Before I could respond, headlights flooded the room. Vehicles outside, multiple engines. The front door burst open and Frank walked in with 6 men, all armed. Well, this is convenient, Frank said, his voice echoing in the empty lodge. The whole family together. One of his men grabbed Amanda. Another pointed a gun at me. Marcus stepped out from where he'd been hidden in the shadows of the hallway. He was pointing his own weapon, his other hand held up showing his phone. You're all on camera, Frank. Video and audio. Being transmitted live to the FBI. Every word you just said, every threat, all recorded. Frank laughed. You think the FBI scares me? I have half the local police force in my pocket. Agents will investigate for 6 months and find nothing. And by then, you'll all be dead. This place burns down tonight. Tragic accident. Or maybe a murder-suicide. Jason finally snapped, killed his sister and her PI, then himself. The story writes itself. The tension was unbearable. Frank's men had guns trained on all of us. Marcus had his weapon aimed at Frank. One wrong move, and this would become a bloodbath. I noticed one of Frank's men, the same guy who chased me in the parking garage, kept glancing toward the door. He looked nervous, uncertain. I took a gamble. How much is he paying you? I asked, looking directly at the nervous guy. Because when this goes wrong, and it will go wrong, you'll take the murder charge. Not Frank. He's got lawyers and connections. You'll just be the trigger man who goes to prison for life. The man's eyes flickered. Frank snapped at him. Shut up and stay focused. But the seed was planted. Then we all heard it. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Multiple vehicles. Marcus smiled slightly. I didn't just wire us up, Frank. I had FBI surveillance teams in position since 4 this afternoon. They've been listening to everything. You just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, insurance fraud, and about 6 other felonies on a federal recording. The nervous guy lowered his weapon immediately. I'm out. I'm not dying for this. 2 other men followed his lead, stepping back with their hands up. Frank's face went red with rage. He tried to run, made it maybe 3 steps before Marcus tackled him. The remaining loyal men tried to fight, but within seconds the lodge was swarming with FBI agents in tactical gear. Guns everywhere, shouting, commands to get on the ground. It was over in less than 2 minutes. Frank and his men were in handcuffs. Amanda was taken into protective custody, still crying. Marcus helped me outside where more agents were waiting. One of them, a woman who introduced herself as Special Agent Torres, told me they'd raided another location simultaneously. They'd found Brad alive, badly beaten but alive, held in a cabin 30 miles north. He was being taken to a hospital. That same night, while I was giving my statement at FBI headquarters, I learned that agents had also arrested my parents at their home. They'd been charged as accessories to attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. The local news caught footage of them being led out in handcuffs, my mother's face hidden behind her hands, my father staring straight ahead with empty eyes. 3 days later, I was released from FBI custody as a cooperating witness. All charges against me had been formally dropped. The evidence Marcus had gathered, combined with Amanda's recorded confession and Brad's testimony from his hospital bed, painted a complete picture of Frank's operation and my parents' involvement. I went back to Aunt Carol's house to recover and try to process everything that had happened. That's when the lawyer showed up. He was from a firm I didn't recognize, carrying a briefcase and wearing an expensive suit. "Mr. Miller," he said when Carol led him into the living room, "I represent the estate of your late grandfather, Robert Miller. I'm here regarding a trust that was established in your name." I stared at him blankly. My grandfather had died 10 years ago. when I was 18. I'd been told there was no inheritance, that everything had gone to my father. The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. That's not entirely accurate. Your grandfather established a trust for you that was set to vest when you turned 30, or earlier if your parents were declared legally unfit or unworthy. The trust is worth $1.2 million. My breath caught. The lawyer continued. Your parents knew about this trust. In fact, they've been trying to access it for years, but the terms were ironclad. The only way they could get control of it was if you died before it vested, and they were your legal heirs. That's why they really wanted you dead, Mr. Miller. Not just for the insurance money. For this trust. He slid the papers across to me. Given their criminal charges and conviction likelihood, the trust has been released to you immediately. It's yours now. The bank accounts, the investment portfolios, everything. Your grandfather wanted to make sure you were taken care of. He just didn't trust your parents to do right by you. I sat there holding papers worth more than $1 million and felt nothing but emptiness. My entire life, I'd been worth more than I knew, and my parents had seen me not as their son, but as an obstacle to money. The legal process took 6 months to fully unfold. Frank and his organization faced federal RICO charges. He was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. My parents pleaded guilty to conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder for hire. They each received 15-year sentences with possibility of parole after 10. Brad cooperated fully with prosecutors, testifying against everyone involved. In exchange, his sentence was reduced to 3 years, most of which he'd serve in a minimum security facility. He'd be out in probably 2 years with good behavior. Amanda's case was more complicated. She faced 5 years for her role in the conspiracy, but the prosecutors acknowledged she'd also been manipulated by Frank to some degree and had ultimately helped expose the entire operation. She showed genuine remorse, broke down multiple times during her interviews and trial. The judge gave her 5 years but recommended a facility with strong mental health support. She'd be eligible for parole in 3. I worked with a therapist twice a week for those 6 months. Dr. Sarah Brennan specialized in trauma, and she helped me process everything. The betrayal, the fear, the anger. Some days were harder than others. I'd wake up from nightmares where I was back in that warehouse, tied up, listening to Frank discuss how he'd kill me. Other days I'd just feel numb, disconnected from everything. Marcus Webb became an unexpected friend. We'd meet for coffee every Wednesday, sometimes talking about the case, sometimes just talking about life. He taught me about his work, about how he'd become a PI after leaving the police force over corruption he'd witnessed. He understood what it felt like to be betrayed by people who were supposed to protect you. Aunt Carol remained my anchor. She was the only family I had left that I could trust. We'd have dinner together every Sunday, and slowly, I started to feel human again. The trust fund from my grandfather gave me financial security I'd never had. I paid Marcus his 50%, which he'd more than earned. I covered Aunt Carol's retirement savings that she'd spent trying to help me. I donated $100,000 to an organization that helped victims of financial fraud and family abuse. The rest I invested carefully, keeping enough to rebuild my life. I moved to Seattle in February, 8 months after my parents had told me to disappear. The city felt far enough away to be a fresh start, but close enough to Aunt Carol that I could visit. I got hired at a tech company as a senior software engineer. My record had been completely expunged, and Marcus had helped me craft a story about the gap in my employment that focused on family crisis and legal complications without going into detail. The hiring manager was sympathetic and didn't pry. Work gave me purpose again. I was good at coding, at solving complex problems. My team respected me. I started to rebuild a professional identity that wasn't connected to the nightmare of the previous year. 6 months into my sentence, Amanda wrote me a letter. It was long, several pages, handwritten on prison stationery. She explained how jealousy had poisoned her from childhood, how our parents had created competition between us without meaning to, how she'd felt invisible next to my accomplishments, and had let that resentment grow into something monstrous. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just wanted me to understand how she'd gotten so lost. She'd been working with a therapist in prison, confronting the ugliness inside herself. She was trying to become someone better, even if it was too late to undo the damage. I read the letter 3 times, cried through the second reading, and then put it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond. Maybe I never would be. Then something unexpected happened. I met Claire. She worked in the coffee shop in my building's lobby, the one I stopped at every morning before work. She noticed I always sat alone, reading or working on my laptop. One day in July, about 10 months after moving to Seattle, she brought my coffee over with a smile and asked what I was reading. That simple question started a conversation that lasted an hour. We started talking every morning. Then she gave me her number. Then we went for a walk in Discovery Park, talking until the sun set over Puget Sound. I told her everything on our 3rd date, expecting her to run. I laid out the whole horrible story, my parents' betrayal, the murder plot, the arrests, everything. Claire listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You survived that? You're stronger than you think." We took things slow. I had trust issues that ran deep, and Claire understood. She had her own history of family trauma, an alcoholic father and a mother who'd chosen addiction over her children. We understood each other's wounds. By October, we were officially together. By December, I'd introduced her to Aunt Carol, who approved immediately. For the first time in over a year, I felt something that resembled happiness. 1 year after my arrest and release, I did something difficult. I visited my parents in federal prison. They were in a facility in Oregon, about a 6-hour drive from Seattle. I didn't tell them I was coming. I just showed up during visiting hours and requested to see them. My mother looked old. She'd aged a decade in 1 year. Gray hair, lines around her mouth, defeated eyes. My father looked hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside him. We sat across from each other in the visitation room with its scratched plastic table and uncomfortable chairs. My mother spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're so sorry, Jason. We were desperate and scared, and we made unforgivable choices." My father finally met my eyes. "You deserve better. You deserved parents who loved you properly, who protected you instead of trying to destroy you. We failed you in every possible way." I listened to their apologies, their explanations about the debt and the fear and the terrible decisions. I didn't interrupt. When they finished, I said what I'd come to say. "I'm not here for you. I'm here for me. To close this chapter. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. You didn't just betray my trust. You tried to end my life. But I'm not going to let what you did define the rest of my existence. I'm building something new, something you're not part of." I walked out of that prison feeling lighter than I had in months. 3 weeks later, I decided to visit Amanda. She was in a facility in Colorado, minimum security for nonviolent offenders. She looked different from the last time I'd seen her, healthier somehow, despite being in prison, like she'd shed something toxic. We sat across from each other in a room filled with other inmates and their visitors. "I'm not here to punish you," I said. "But I'm not here to absolve you either." Amanda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I don't expect forgiveness, Jason. I just want you to know I'm working every day to become someone different, someone who doesn't let jealousy poison everything, someone who can feel happy for other people's success instead of resentful." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her therapy, about confronting the ugliness of what she'd done, about how she'd written letters to Brad apologizing, though she hadn't sent them because she didn't think she had the right, about how she was taking college courses through a prison program, studying social work because she wanted to help people who felt invisible like she had. "I don't know if we'll ever be close again," I told her honestly, "but I don't want to hate you forever. That hurts me more than it hurts you." We parted with a tentative understanding. Not siblings yet, maybe never again, but not enemies either. Claire and I celebrated my 30th birthday in November, 2 years after the nightmare began. We had dinner at a nice restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay, and she gave me a gift that made me cry. It was a photo album she'd made, filled with pictures from the past year. Us hiking in the Cascades, laughing at a Mariners game, having coffee in the morning light. Each picture had a caption about new beginnings and chosen family. "This is who you are now," she said, "not what they tried to make you." I proposed to her that night. Spontaneous and unplanned, but it felt right. She said yes. We decided on a small wedding in the spring, just close friends, Aunt Carol, and a few colleagues. Marcus agreed to be my best man, which made me laugh because a year ago I'd been his client, and now he was my closest friend. The wedding happened in April, 2.5 years after my parents told me to disappear. It was small and perfect. Aunt Carol cried through the whole ceremony. Marcus made a speech about second chances and finding family in unexpected places. Claire and I wrote our own vows, and I promised to choose her every day, to build a life based on trust and honesty and love that wasn't conditional. She promised the same. That night, sitting in our hotel room after the reception, I got a piece of mail that had been forwarded from my Seattle address. It was from Amanda. She'd been released early for good behavior, out after 3 years. The envelope contained a card with a drawing she'd made in prison. 2 trees that had once grown intertwined but were now separate, both growing tall and healthy on their own. Inside was a note in her handwriting. "Thank you for giving me the chance to become someone better. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. Trying to be someone who deserves a second chance, even if not from you. I'm working at a community center, helping at-risk kids. Small steps, but steps forward. I hope you're happy, Jason. You deserve happiness more than anyone I know." I pinned the card to the refrigerator in our apartment when we got back from our honeymoon. Claire saw it and asked if I was okay with having it there. "I am," I told her. "It reminds me that people can change. That redemption is possible, even after terrible things. I don't know if Amanda and I will ever have a real relationship again, but I can acknowledge she's trying. Now, sitting here 3 years after my parents told me the greatest gift I could give was to disappear, I can say with complete honesty that I'm happy. I have a job I'm good at. I have a wife who loves me. I have Aunt Carol, who never gave up on me. I have Marcus, who believed me when no one else did. I have a life I built from nothing, after everything was taken from me. My parents wanted me to disappear, and in a way, I did. The old Jason, who needed their approval, who thought family was everything simply because of blood, he's gone. The new Jason knows that family is who shows up when you're at your lowest. That love doesn't come with conditions or price tags. That sometimes the people who hurt you most teach you the most important lessons. I learned that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. I learned that some people's love is transactional, even dangerous. But I also learned I'm stronger than I ever believed. That there are good people in the world willing to help. That trust, once shattered, can be rebuilt slowly with the right people. I don't forgive my parents. I may never fully trust again the way I did before. But I'm free. And that freedom, that peace, is the greatest gift I ever gave myself. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from family to save yourself? Have you ever discovered that the people who were supposed to protect you were actually your biggest threat? How did you rebuild? How did you learn to trust again? I'd genuinely like to know your stories, your experiences with betrayal and recovery. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own relationships and boundaries, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about surviving the unthinkable and finding strength you didn't know you had. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to walk away from toxic family. That choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for caring about what happened to me and what I learned from it. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're facing, you find the courage to choose yourself when you need to build the life you deserve, surrounded by people who genuinely love you, not because of what you can give them, but because of who you are. Take care of yourselves out there. You're stronger than you know.